You're listening to the Empowered Divorce Podcast, where you practice being the chooser in your life again, one day at a time. Thanks for joining me. Hello, my amazing listeners. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me. Remember last week, I redid the ending of that podcast episode of episode 100 because I was just so moved by Celine Dion's story, her docuseries, her words, and I decided to not include the psychological reasoning behind this capital S self-higher power concept. So I'm going to share that with you today, as I still feel like it would be really helpful. Each of our human brains learn differently and hear concepts differently, which is why I always say that working with someone one-on-one can really up your healing, because trying to embody this whole concept with just a podcast probably isn't really going to work. I also just wanted to validate those of you who are perhaps listening to maybe last week's or this week's talking about this idea that you are 100% of worth and value, who might be hearing me talk about a higher self, like who you really are, and trying to connect to that. And maybe it just feels like you really don't have that part of you, that maybe something's missing. Maybe you really can't find this sense of self in you. Can I just promise you that if that's what you're experiencing with these episodes, it doesn't mean that something's wrong with you, that you aren't even doing it wrong, or that you're not just the oddball out in the group. Sorry, no luck for you. Perhaps you just need to borrow my belief for a while as you practice creating your own. There can also be a part of you that is resisting this concept, which when I say part of you, that will make more sense here in a moment when I talk more about parts work. But perhaps there is this parentified part of you that maybe has been acting like the higher self, or another part of you that's been acting like the one in charge. Even if you believe that who you are is actually not this part of you, don't need this part to stay alive, and that this part really isn't the whole self, then this part can be really afraid. It can start to feel abandoned, rejected, alone. It's almost like this part is losing its job, and so it's going to fight like hell to hold on to it, right? Take the keys of the car and drive. Okay, I'm diving into parts work. And you're probably like, what the heck, Amie, are you even talking about? Now, here's the psychology behind this principle of core self, intrinsic worth and value. And it's through the work of Dr. Dick Schwartz, who developed the internal family systems therapy modality. I absolutely love parts work. I believe this viewpoint also aligns with what I do believe about our souls and how they are so different from our human body and our human brain and our human emotion. When I use this with clients, this modality, even those who have been doing therapy for years, they have made more progress in one parts work session than years of cognitive therapy, and I just love it. I think the reason why this works so beautifully when there has been such enmeshment, if you will, of our parts, like we can't see the difference between our core self and all of these parts of ourself. When all of that's jumbled together, then when we have one part, like let's just say people pleaser part, that grabbed the keys of the car and drove us off the freaking cliff, then it makes sense that we are going to think that something's wrong with us, right? But when we can learn to separate who we are from all these different parts, it gives a little bit of distance so that we can better see what's going on. We can better articulate, analyze, question, be curious, have compassion. When these different parts of ourself take the keys of the car and drive away, we are not making it mean so much about us intrinsically. I wanted to go over the basic idea of internal family systems work because I think it's a really great start to helping you decipher who you are versus these different parts of you that are part of your human experience. So again, Dick Schwartz realized in his years of work as a therapist, patient after patient, that there were multiple parts to people. And he started to see this even within himself. Decades ago, therapist psychologists used to say, well, they have multiple personality disorder, right? They called it a disorder. Well, what he started to realize was like, no, 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 no. We all have multiple parts to ourselves, and it's not a disorder. We just don't know it. We just don't recognize it, and we're not differentiating between them. And so he started to really dig into this and realize that each part that we identify has different qualities, different personalities, roles, jobs. And he noticed that each part fell into one of these three categories. And I'm going to go over those three categories. They are exile, managers, and firefighters. It's funny. I was actually working with a client who is a firefighter, and we were doing some parts work, and I was telling him about these three different categories. And I was like, and you're going to love this. There's a firefighter part. Anyways, the first part category is our exiles. Now, these parts of us hold the pain from past traumas and hurt, all of those experiences that caused us a lot of emotional injury. They feel alone, they feel scared, and we hide them away to try and protect ourselves from feeling the pain again. These are most often younger parts, these exiles, but they are very vulnerable parts. So, like neglect, abandonment, rejection, traumatic loss, especially early on, bullying, shame, fear, hopelessness, alone. Those are all exile parts. And they all have intense emotion that come with them. Well, rather than feeling and processing this intense emotion, we have managers. Now, these parts work really, really hard to keep all of those exiles' pain from coming up. These parts help us manage our day-to-day lives by controlling our behaviors and our emotions. So we got to control it, shut the emotion down. Nope, don't do that. So like people pleaser part, like I mentioned, that's manager, controller, caretaker, fixer, perfectionist, inner critic, overthinker. These are all proactive managers. If I am perfect enough, right? If I do everything perfect, then maybe I won't be abandoned, or maybe I won't be rejected. Because if I am rejected, then I will feel worthless. And if I feel worthless, that's just way too painful, right? All of these proactive managers are working really, really hard to control the situation, right? Control what people think, control what people do, so that we're not maybe left alone, rejected, feel pain. Then we have reactive managers, and these are called firefighters. Now, when the pain of the exile part starts to break through, so if we start to feel lonely, abandoned, rejected, if that starts to come to the surface, then the firefighters jump in and they distract us from the pain. And these parts often are leading us to do things very impulsively to numb out and escape all of that hurt and pain. So you've heard me share before that I used eating, right? I had a binge eating disorder. And because that was my way, that was my firefighter part way of coping with the pain. When that pain was so intense, I needed to eat. It needed to come in really, really quick to numb out. That was my firefighter part. So like not eating, right? Anorexia, substance abuse, procrastination, high risk taking, addiction, right? Any addiction is because the firefighter part is running the show. Any self-harm, shopaholic even, over-exerciser, then the ultimate firefighter of suicide. So you might have, let's say, people pleaser part, constantly seeking approval and validation from other people. And then that's going to lead to exhaustion, right? It's emotionally exhausting. Any people pleaser knows this. Like, it is exhausting to constantly seek that approval and validation from others. Well, when that emotional strain becomes too much, binge eater part might step in to provide that temporary comfort through overeating. Or maybe inner critic has really been harshly judging and pushing for that constant self-improvement, right? Just be better, be better, be better, do more, do more, do more. And then when that pressure of self-criticism becomes just too unbearable, right? Can't do it anymore. Procrastinator part might take over. And now we're not going to do a damn thing. Now we're just going to avoid, avoid, avoid. Exiles influence the system, all those pain points, right? Hurt, betrayal, hopelessness. All of those exiles influence the internal family system by trying to bring their pain to the forefront for healing. They want to have attention, but this activation in our body can really be overwhelming. When I do brain spotting, I talk about activation. We bring in that activation so that we can process it. That's what brain spotting does, is it targets these exile parts, brings them to the surface, lets them rear their ugly head so that they can move out and move through outside of all of these managers and firefighter parts. So those parts don't have to protect the exile anymore. Does that make sense? Now, there is something very, very incredible and important around internal family systems modality. It is the center of all of this. And it is the self, capital S self, the core of who you are, your true essence, untouched by trauma, pain, or negative experiences. Your higher self, your core self, embodies calm curiosity, compassion, confidence, creativity, clarity, courage, and connectedness. Those are the 8 characteristics of your higher self. It comes with you. You do not have to hustle for any of that. It's when you choose to access that core self, that part of you. That's when you tap into your higher self. That's when you can sit with more and more, longer and longer, your enoughness. Now, unlike all these other parts of you, the core self is never damaged by trauma. If you hear anything today, please just hear that you, capital S self, is not damaged by trauma. You at your core is not your trauma. The higher self is always whole and intact, no matter what you've been through. You really are enough just as you are. The self, your true self, is always worthy and valuable and lovable. Trauma and past experiences that you have had might make you feel otherwise. But those feelings, right, those emotions are coming from parts of you that are hurting, not like those exiles, not from your true essence. When you start to connect with your core self, you can approach these hurting parts with compassion and understanding. You can begin to separate and distance, like I said earlier, distance yourself just a little bit more from the hurt part of you, or the part of you that believes you should have known, or that you should have stopped it sooner. All of those wounded, protective, and reactive parts, you can create a little more distance and see and hold on to your core self just a little bit longer. As you look at these, heal these exiles, you'll begin to heal from within. Can you see how understanding this is so crucial to your healing journey? It really helps you let go of the shame of self-judgment and embrace that self-acceptance and self-love. This kind of shift is going to provide that foundation for your future growth and well-being. This is what resiliency is going to be cultivated upon. Okay, if you have not seen the movie Inside Out, or part 1 or 2, you must go see it with your kids. I can't say enough about it. Besides, I just went and saw part 2. I actually took myself on a date and went and saw part 2. And besides one part at the very, very end, which I thought was ridiculous, and it actually made me really mad. There's this one part at the very end where they're fanning over mom and dad's inside parts. And they do this thing with dad, and it's really sad because they totally dismissed his emotions. And I just thought, really? Like, are we still in this like man cave, Mendel feel emotion space? Anyways, I was really disappointed because I'm like, the whole thing is so great and beautiful, and you would throw that in at the end. Anyways, it's still worth going. It's really, really good. Cannot say enough about it, but I don't want to talk about the whole episode today. I was actually going to just do a whole episode on the show, but just go watch it. Let's just say I walked out of that movie and literally wrapped my arms around myself, hugging my little anxiety part. Every part of you has a place. And that's what I get with those movies. Why I love having my kids see them is because it really conveys this message that every part of you has a place. There are no bad parts of you. And that's the whole point to the modality of IFS. And then Dick Schwartz talks about all the time is that there are no bad parts. In fact, it's a great book, No Bad Parts. But there are no bad parts of you. They all serve a purpose. They're all trying to show you something. It is your choice to listen to these different parts and choose whether or not you're going to act from one of these manager parts, firefighter parts, or from your core self. And it is practice because you are never, ever, 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 nor should you, get to this place in life where you are only functioning from core self. That isn't possible because you are human, because you are made up of all of these different parts. I love using the term wise self to refer to core self. Often we think of wisdom as belonging to older folks. At least I did, right? Because they're seen as wise because they've lived longer. They've faced more situations and they've learned from all of their experiences over the years. But here's the thing. Wisdom comes from embracing all that life throws at us. If we only ever choose what feels right or brought us joy, would we truly be making a choice? It's through navigating the full spectrum of your life experiences, all of the joy, all of the happy, and all of the challenging, and all of the pain, that we really cultivate true wisdom, that we really are able to choose how we want to show up next. I don't think wisdom is necessarily about age. It's about openness to life's lessons and what that can do for us when we experience the emotions that we have along the journey. When we choose clarity, curiosity, compassion for ourselves, when we lean into courage and connectedness, creativity and confidence, when we feel more calm, we are accessing our higher self. When we are present, when we have perspective, patience, persistence, and playfulness, we are accessing our higher self. And we can manage all of these other parts of ourself. And rather than identifying with the part that has been betrayed, but rather than identifying with the part that makes a mistake, we can hold on to the part of us that is whole and complete, because you really are enough. Your worth and value are not defined by your trauma or the hurtful things that you've experienced. Your core self is unconditionally worthy and valuable just as you are. Okay, I want to leave you with some journal prompts to ask yourself and help you connect more to your core self. But first, I just want to mention, this is the work that I do with my clients, my Believing in You members. And starting the second week, I think in August, I'm going to start a 9-week deep dive into each of these 8 characteristics that I talked about today of the higher self. I'm going to teach you the concept. We'll start with, let's just say we start with clarity. We're going to have a whole week where we deep dive into clarity. I'm going to give you tools to practice cultivating this characteristic. You have a workbook to go along with it. If you've been thinking about joining, now is the time. The first week of your monthly membership is free right now because it really, really is important work. I want you to be a part of it. I wanted you to just know that we are taking a deep dive into these 8 characteristics of the higher self. Okay, your journal prompt is, and this is all going to be in the show notes, y'all, but the first question is, what qualities do you admire about yourself? What qualities do you admire about yourself? We're going to discover a little bit more about your inner worth. The next prompt is to help uncover any obstacles to your self-worth. What negative beliefs do you hold about yourself that might be blocking your sense of worth? And how does this impact your day-to-day life? So what are those negative beliefs? We got to bring them up, look at them, see what they are. How are they blocking your sense of worth and value? And then how is that impacting you every day? Okay, number 3, the last one is to help you embrace your core self. The question is, what does your higher self look like and feel like? And what does this part of you do? So what do you see this part of you doing, feeling, and looking like? I want you to describe this part of you in detail. then list 2 ways in which you will remember this part of yourself. Again, I really hope that something in today's 100th episode helps you feel like maybe it's possible to believe that you really are 100% of worth and value, and maybe give you more motivation to keep practicing, to keep going, to keep trying, and to keep choosing. Because when you access this part of you, you are accessing the chooser part. You are accessing your agency to be able to choose the life that you want, because you absolutely can. Take care, everybody. One of the reasons that I think my Dating from Within workshop would be helpful for anybody, whether you are scared to date, ready to date, or currently dating, is to get to know more of these parts that I've been talking about today. In fact, I'll often tell my clients that when they do start dating, let's not date to actually match just yet. Let's date to get to know more parts of yourself even better. For example, let's say you text someone, start introducing yourself, they introduce themselves, you start feeling a little bit excited that maybe you're actually going to get asked out, or you're just excited to have an adult conversation with someone from the opposite sex. And that's just exciting in of itself sometimes. Then let's say you get ghosted the next day. What part of you shows up when you realize you've been ghosted? Is it your rejection part, angry part, victim part? This is what I mean by dating from within and learning how to see more of these parts of yourself. It's so important to get to know these parts of you so that you don't repeat the same patterns in the future. And I know that everyone that I have ever worked with has said, Amie, I just don't want to get it wrong again. I just don't want to make the same mistake. Well, then we have to get to know these parts that lived with you in your past. In fact, the first day of the workshop is all about your past and what parts and what those parts know so that we can create a different future. The next workshop is August 29th through 31st, 5 p.m. Mountain Time. For more information about that workshop, head over to the show notes or amiewoolsey.com. I want to help you date from a completely different perspective. I want to help you date as the chooser, because you absolutely get to choose the dating experience. No matter what happens, you get to be that chooser. Take care, everybody.